This is the Today with Tally podcast. And folks, we're being joined by former senior advisor to the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, Berney Flowers. Now, look, Berney, a lot of Americans don't understand what happened during this botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Now, when the United States went in there, when all hell was breaking loose, FEMA actually, from what I understand, is that FEMA went in there to run this operation when it should have been under the control of the Citizen Immigration Service. With that being said, we had about 12,000 Afghanis left before being fully vetted. What was going on during your briefings there? And is there any truth to this at all?
Well, it looked crazy to me from my perspective. And, from my perspective, the going in position was DOD was the only organization that was big enough and outfitted enough to bring these people to the United States. We were the biggest organization that had the ability to carry out something like that. So the decision was made at the senior levels that this was going to be a DHS operation and DOD was going to be in trail. Now, what does that mean? A lot of people in DHS, you got to remember, were working from home. So they physically weren't there. All right. Then a lot of them didn't have the experience of large scale people movement from one side of the globe to the other. So there was a heavy DOD contingent helping to do this, that, and the other, making the logistics arrangement. But the biggest deal was DHS didn't have the budget to do this sort of stuff. So we were moving billions, and I mean billions of dollars over. And as I remember, I think you said it ended up being like 87,000 Afghans. So remember, those people came to the United States. We told the American people that they had been vetted. Imagine trying to give shots and language training and food to 87,000 people in a hurry. It's impossible. We told a bunch of lies. I didn't tell any lies, but the senior staff told a gang of lies. And the issue today is that we told these people they'd been vetted. We told these people they had all their medical shots and all that. We have no idea whether we brought criminals and terrorists into the United States or not. The security couldn't have been done, because you got to remember, not just are you bringing these people over, you don't know if you're bringing a terrorist along. You may be saving somebody's life and killing your own at the same time. You might be bringing in a sleeper cell. All that had to happen at all this, and Biden made this decision just almost overnight. So there was just a lot that happened that I just felt that could have been done a whole lot better. We had a lot of DOD support, but the DOD support was not in a decision-making mode. The only organization in the government that had the strength and courage and budget to carry out this stuff was DOD, and we were put in a secondary role. So I'm sitting over here at DHS headquarters acting like a liaison. Basically, Mayorkas, used to come by my office pretty much every morning, and sometimes he'd joke around and say, "Hey, Berney, keep that DOD money coming." And I used to have to say, "Yes, sir," and grimace, because the idea is that money was being spent for purposes that it wasn't allocated for, and Congress didn't seem to care. And in the meantime, we were right in the middle of COVID. We were right in the middle of ramping up the Ukraine war, sending huge amounts of money over there, and all the many, many other operations that we have. And so that just seemed to me that something that just should not have been a priority. So to answer your original question, it was mismanaged in the nth degree.
87,000 Afghanis were flown into the United States. And the sad thing about that is that the United States of America has ignored the majority of SIVs, the special immigrant visas. And these are the folks that worked side by side and in unison with the United States of America during this 20-year war on terror, that we promised these folks citizenship upon the mission being completed. We brought in folks that had zero allegiance, that were not helping the United States of America on the ground in Afghanistan. And here we are abandoning our SIVs behind now enemy lines who have to watch their backs every single day because they are known now as traitors.
A lot of those people have been killed.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And so when you look at the 87,000 that we brought in here that were strategically placed around the country, strategically placed. I mean, they're putting these folks into neighborhoods that they are now beginning to turn into, they're building their mosques and I mean, look at in Texas. I mean, they are turning, they want a caliphate. I mean, literally, they are bringing the caliphate to the United States of America, and we have seen this play out in the United Kingdom. I mean, we have seen this play out in other countries as well. And again, the United States of America, the Biden regime, literally made this possible to happen.
Yes. And a lot of people don't understand, and I'm glad that you brought this up. This isn't this overflow of immigrants isn't just happening in the United States. This happened in Western Europe as well. And so you've got rape gangs running around in England and Sweden and Germany and Norway. And so this is an assault on Western civilization, and people don't understand it because a lot of folks don't watch the news. They don't pay attention to politics. They got all kinds of problems over there. And all this is going on while we've got COVID. All this is going on while we've got the Ukraine war. And it's just terrible. And it's terrible. So, like I said, the Biden administration, first of all, Biden wasn't in charge of anything. It was well known among most of the senior people that he basically was non-functional. And you could see that when he had the debate last year with Trump. I mean, that's pretty much what was going on. And he wasn't fit to be a president. He wasn't fit to be a competitor. He was a poor president. And he wasn't leading us. It's just not good at all. So altogether, it was a failure on our part at the senior levels. And I'm just so thankful that we've got the adults in the room now running things.
20 million illegal aliens poured across our southern border, unchecked, unvetted.
Yep.
87,000 Afghanis come in, the majority of them unchecked, unvetted.
Yep.
Hurried up on airplanes it was just 24/7, 365 rotations and rotations upon rotations. Every military plane, they even were chartered commercial airlines to get everybody there out of Afghanistan. Again, makes no sense.
Oh, and let me throw something else in there. Do you remember the Haitian, there's an influx of Haitians that showed up at the border down in El Paso, at the border station down there. I think it was 18,000 Haitians under a bridge. Okay. And they were pretty much, all of them were just led into the United States. Now, I remember there was at least one aircraft load of people that was sent back to Port-au-Prince, but the majority of those people are in the United States, and they were unvetted as well. They just disappeared. And you saw them later. A lot of people, where did all those Haitians from show up? How did all of them show up in Springfield, Ohio en masse? That's a question that nobody's asking. I'd love to know the answer to that. And I've got some things that I prefer not to say on the air, but I'm just telling you, those people were led into the United States and allowed to do as they wish. And they were obviously supported by someone, because most of those people couldn't speak Spanish or English, but they were led across the border.
I want to say that was like Del Rio.
Yeah.
Del
Eagle
Rio.
Pass.
Eagle Pass.
Yep.
And they were under a bridge, and you could see the third world. They were taking branches and they were like literally building huts and all that. I was like, this is insane.
Yep.
And it's going on right here in the United States of America. And of course, their way of life in a third world country is very different than our way of life here in the United States of America. A lot of these folks don't even know what a toilet is, or what running water is, or a home, that it's built with lumber and with mortar and bricks and and concrete and all this stuff. So I've even heard that across the country that a lot of these Haitians and again, these folks that are coming in from third world countries are flushing everything down the toilet. They're like, is this just where we put our trash? I mean, like, and so they've got all these buildups and going in all these apartment complexes of, pipes getting full of stuff and just sewage leaks and breaches all over the place because they don't know what they're doing. Like no one's teaching them how to basically assimilate into the United States. And you know what they say? Immigration without assimilation is an invasion. And that's just the way it is. And so is our country going to continue this invasion? Or are we going to do the right thing and process these guys out and say, get in line if you want to become a citizen of the United States of America?
And all this is going on, and I'm sitting there watching, and I have no control. All I can do is execute because I'm doing what I signed up to do, which is carry out the orders of those appointed over me until I decided I can't do that. And now you've got all these people in the federal government that say they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. Well, you can do what I did. You can walk away. How about that?
How many Berney Flowers were there in the actual government that walked away from this treasonous regime?
Thousands. That's not something that is very well publicized, but I can tell, let's see, I think there was about 18,000 military people and had to be at least 10,000 civilians. And we were treated pretty badly. I can say that I put in what's called a religious waiver. They gave some people hope that they would be able to stick around and, and not take the jab because of their, religious affiliations like me. But most of those religious waivers and whatever waivers were pretty much turned down. It was like, okay, let's get rid of all the America First people. And, they just did not seem to care. And so, I feel badly for the folks that have been caught in this purge from Doge. But here's the thing. People seem to fail to understand that Bill Clinton got rid of over 300,000 civilians back in the 90s. All right. And a lot of these people are supposed to be nonpartisan civilians, and they're not. So the bottom line is that, all this has to change. We're supposed to be civil servants like I was. You're supposed to be nonpartisan. And when you get to the point where you can't carry out the directions of the president of the United States, you need to have a health and safety check and get yourself on out of there and find yourself a new job. Bottom line. If you're going to stay, then your opinion really doesn't matter. What you need to do is carry out what you're told to do and what you're paid to do and what you're signed up and took an oath to do. Civilians take oaths too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how dangerous of a government really did we have operating here in the United States of America from sea to shining sea when you have people that are standing up and saying, I can no longer serve under this administration because of the failed policies, because of the non-American first agenda. And that's the easiest way to carry out an agenda is to get rid of all the people that are fighting for the home team and to bring in a bunch of foreigners to say, hey, look, we are going to do whatever we can to cripple and destabilize the United States of America so we can turn it into this or that.
Caliphate.
The caliphate or whatever, like you were talking about earlier, the World Economic Forum and, the liberalism, the Marxism, the socialism, all the things that are thrown into this crazy, world that we're in right now with, these new orders. Right. And,
a lot of they throw the word Nazi around. And, people don't seem to realize that Nazi means National Socialist. Okay. So our enemies are socialists. They're not free market people. They're not for freedom. They are socialists. And when it all boils down to it, no socialist government has ever been successful. And I ask people to name me one. And the people that I talk to, that seem to espouse socialism, they go quiet because they can't answer that question, because socialism generally ends up in death. And you can check that in China. You can check that in Russia. You can check that in Nazi Germany. And it always ends up in a whole lot of human tragedy. And if we fail, that's the end. for everything. So we can't afford to fail. We got to get these people out of here because they don't believe in our way of life. And there's a whole lot of other thoughts I have that I can say now that I'm not working for the government anymore.
And there you have it, folks. Berney Flowers, the former senior advisor to DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And Berney didn't stay long. I think he was in there for 2 years out of the 4-year stint. And he left because he could no longer carry out the duties of the President of the United States of America and his boss, Alejandro Mayorkas, because of the dereliction of duty. And Berney takes his oath of office very, very seriously. He spent 20 years in the United States Air Force as a lieutenant colonel, and he spent another at least a decade and a half, if not more, working within the DoD ranks all the way up into the Pentagon.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.